I'm Kavisha Dodangwala, and you're joining with Satahana Season 2, Episode 1. Satahana is an initiative by FMF Media, the media club of University of Colombo Faculty of Management and Finance, in order to enhance the awareness of students about current market issues in Sri Lanka. Satahana involves discussing solutions for the ongoing issues in the business environment with our very own university lecturers, where students can gain a sound knowledge about the environmental fluctuations and how they should address them diplomatically. For the first episode of Satahana, Season 2, we thought of discussing about a very timely and a relevant topic to the undergraduates, which is COVID-19, work from home, and its consequences. For today's discussion, I would like to warmly welcome Senior Lecturer attached to the Department of Human Resource Management, Ms. Ruheya Rasik. We are all well aware that the pandemic has resulted in major changes in the normal operations of businesses. Work from home practices can be stated as one of the most significant changes. Work from home is not as easy as it sounds. What infrastructure support do you think is required to facilitate working from home for employees?
Yes, Kavisha. Now, if we look at the way that usually how employment is executed in our part of the world, usually the mechanism before the pandemic, it was like people used to regularly commute to work, and then from a separate place, they used to work. I mean, I'm talking about the regular employees of an organization. But of course, with this pandemic, which indeed is something that was not foreseen, and which has impacted on across all the countries in a world in a similar manner, work from home has actually become new normal tendency of working, as you correctly pointed out. And as you again correctly pointed out, it's not an easy task. There are a lot of support infrastructure and other kind of support that are required. So if we look at one by one, first kind of support or the facilities that are required is ICT related infrastructure support. Now this could be both included in the hardware and as well as the internet related support. Now if we look at our country, according to a report that was recently presented by the IPS, we are listed as the 83rd place among 121 countries in an index called the Network Readiness Index. Network Readiness Index. And this report also indicates that only 22% of our population holds some kind of a hardware machine that could either be a personal computer or a laptop. But this doesn't mean that these people would own an internet connection. Now, if you look at our context, we need a lot of support if we are to get our people to work from home. Of course, they need this infrastructure related support as number one. We need to see that our employees, whether they have the machines, whether they have a good connection, and if not, we need to see as an organization how can we, we can organize these requirements which are essential to make this work from home a success. So that is the infrastructure related support. And then of course, we also need psychological support. And as you know, employees, or not just employees, if we look at our population, the global population, the psychological issues are skyrocketing, which are associated with the pandemic. One kind of an issue would include, of course, the uncertainty among employees, because they do not know what is going to happen to them. They do not know when their businesses, when their organizations will shut down, and when they would be, made redundant. That uncertainty is there. And then, of course, they also have an anxiety concerning, will I get COVID? Will my loved ones will get COVID? Right? So if so, then what is going to happen? And as you know, there were a few cases reported even in our country of where people opted out to suicide when they get to know about that their loved ones are being contracted with COVID. And not only that, if you look at employment population, they have to adapt to new ways of doing things, like working from home, and of course working on a virtual environment, because you have all the time used to work in your cubicles, in your comfort zone with your colleagues around. And sometimes now, of course, they are not around you, so you will lose that contact with your colleagues, the psychological support that you would get in a while working with your colleagues in a physical environment under one roof. So there are so many psychological issues that work from home can stem up, especially work from home in a COVID pandemic kind of a situation, which is a tension situation. Now, if it is under a normal situation where an organization is going to opt out, some of these psychological issues may be, brought down. But if we stick into the context, work from home has become a necessity under a pandemic, right? So therefore, that is why the psychological issues are skyrocketing. So the second kind of support that is required is a psychological support. And then third one is policy level support, right? So as you know, we, not just us, most of the countries, they do not have any labor laws governing work from home enacted, right? It is not just our country, there are so many countries. So therefore, now what has happened is, when there is no regulation or a law governing this is how you should work, this is how you should make people work from home, then how are these, how are you going to regulate, how are you going to moderate, and how are you going to organize this whole working from home mechanism? Institution, they will have to devise their own policies, right? For example, what is going to be the working hours if you are talking about work from home? Because there are some people who are complaining now working from home has become like, working 24 hours. Okay, so that is one thing. And then of course the break times, right? What are the break times? And also, like, if the organization is kind of asking the employees to work during the standard break time, is there a way that we can escalate this grievance to somebody, right? So these kinds of policy level support should also be there, even though the government or any government, even though they do not have any blanket law governing work from home concepts, organizations will have to devise their own policy of how you devise your working from home plans and also execute those plans. Then the fourth kind of support that is required is the environmental support, which is very, very essential. Now, environmental support means like people, they used to commute to work, stay in their own, cozy workstations, and they could concentrate. But unlike that era, which is bygone now, people are juggling with many roles when they work from home. Especially if you look at work from home moms like me. That's what I even asked you all to schedule the interview very early in the morning before my child wakes up, right? Working from home moms, and then of course dual learner couples, right? So when they both work from home, how you manage your other household chaos and things like that. And also the other thing is, the usual people who supported you in your household, they tend to think, these people are at home now, right? They are not cladded in their office attire, so they are just on the computer. They may get to think like that. So even if all these other three kind of supports that I said, infrastructure support, policy level support, and psychological support is there, the support from the environment, right? Household environment is very, very essential for work from home to become a success.
Thank you, madam. So earlier you mentioned about various legal reforms and stuff, but can you further elaborate how a company or an employer can meet their legal responsibilities concerning an employee's health and safety if they are working from home? And do you think it is the need of the hour to change employment laws in order to protect both the employees and the employers in this regard?
Yes, Kavisha. Let me look at your first question, which is like, what should be the obligations of the employer concerning work from home? Like I said earlier, now this conversation that we are having today is relating to the work from home concept that has arisen due to a turbulent situation in the environment, right? Due to a tension situation where like this is not something that we have planned out, but we have opted as a last resort because we need to keep the systems up and running. This is not something where like we have had a proper plan before and that we have transited into. And so therefore, and also I would like to, since you spoke about the legal aspects concerning work from home and also legislation around COVID, which I may talk about later. As I said earlier, not just Sri Lanka, many countries, they do not have regulations set forth by the employment law, employment related regulation about working from home, right? Now, as I said, and I reiterate now, if you look at the employment pattern in our parts of the world, right? People were used to commute to work. They used to have their, work on a full-time basis to one employer, right? So how they are governed by is basically mandated by the law of the country, right? But then, as I said, before the pandemic, before this COVID situation, working from home was an option for employees called independent employees. They just provide services to some other employer, but they are on their own. So how their employment terms were regulated is based on the contractual terms that would be enforced between the independent worker and the particular organization that they're rendering the service to, right? So in that case, now that is how it has been happening. So there is no, not just our country, I repeat, there are so many countries who do not have regulations concerning these, employment, moderating or regulating employees who are working from home. Like I said earlier, now how can you manage them? That's your question. People are working from home. What are their obligations and all these things? Basically, how organizations carry out this task is based on the best practices that they have adopted by themselves, right? Maybe by looking at some of the benchmark organizations or through policy decisions with the board members and other very important stakeholders, right? So if you look at the obligations of the employers concerning work from home is that you need to ensure, like I said earlier, that they have the necessary infrastructure. Okay, now there were few students because I do have some, we do conduct our MBA lectures and all that for the working population. And then there were some students who complained, telling that their companies have not given them the necessary equipment. They assume that everybody should have a laptop or a desktop and that everybody should have a connection. But like I pointed out, according to the Network Readiness Index, we only 22% of our population have access to this infrastructure. So you need to see that, in fact, these people have the equipment. If not, you need to see how you can provide them. In fact, there are certain companies who have had a proper assessment of the availability of these infrastructures that are essential to work from home and who have provided those. And like I said earlier, having proper policy decisions, right? Having a proper policy concerning work from home, like, okay, so this is how we are getting our employees work. This is their hours. This is how we are going to monitor their productivity, right? Because as you know, some organizations traditionally how we are used to is to monitor performance through time-based mechanism like attendance. But now, can you do it? Of course, there are some companies who have invested on tracking attendance by investing on system plugins to their existing human resource information systems. But then that again is a cost for organizations who did not have those, right? And so that is one thing. How are you going to measure productivity is one concern that you need to be clear about. And then the other thing is, one very important factor is you need to give clear guidelines. This is how we are operating. Because like, for example, now when you are one institution, right, that has a lot of other departments or branches, okay, you can't let the leaders of these individual units to have their own policies, devise their own policies. So this is why it is very essential to have a written policy, right? A written policy. And of course, you need to disseminate it to all the members of the organization, so they're aware. They're aware, right? For example, I can tell you, like, if I like, take the example of two students. They both work for one same organization, but in different units, in different branches. So one student, he was telling that, okay, in our branch, we are on a rollout basis. We have a particular roster basis, so our boss won't take every one of us work in the organization at the same time. So one student was telling like that. So another student who worked for the same organization, by the way, but in a different branch, that person was telling, like, our boss wants every one of us to work, that he won't put us on a roster basis. He thinks, that everyone could come and work because we are not in a lockdown area. Now, the previous person is also not in a lockdown area. So therefore, you can't have these discrepancies to be practiced discrepancies to be prevailing in one organization. So therefore, you need to have these policies crafted. They should be documented. They should be disseminated, right? So these are some of the things, and also adherence to whatever the regulations, the circulars issued by the government. That is very, very important. If the government does something, concerning employees, you need to adhere that to.
Work from home and mandatory redundancies have certain benefits to employees, but employees are mentally affected by these unexpected events. How can organizations help employees to overcome these psychological issues?
Yes, Kavisha, as we discussed earlier, work from home caused by COVID-19 pandemic has caused many psychological issues, as we discussed earlier. Now, let's see how can organizations support their employees to overcome these kinds of psychological issues. Now, if you see, there are three kinds of organizations that we can find out in this pandemic time, right? One is companies who have closed down, okay, who have shut down operations because of very many reasons. And I must emphasize at this point that organizations, when they establish, as you know, there is an accounting principle as well, they intend to remain for the foreseeable future, right? But then there can be different confrontations that lead organizations to close down, right? So if and as you know, an HR plan of an organization or any functional plan of an organization is actually devised from the business strategy and business plan of the organization, right? The strategic plan. Now, if a pandemic or otherwise forces an organization to scale down operations, of course, you will have to close down, because as we are referring to business organization with the objective of profit as their main motive, right? So closing down of organizations is anticipated. If you look at the statistics, globally it is expected that 400 million job cuts would be enforced with this COVID. Already some have been affected, and then it would go up to 400 million, right? And then if you set aside those organizations, if you look at the organizations which are up and running, who have survived, right? Again, there are two kinds of organizations within this genre, right? One, organizations who are thriving during the pandemic. Of course, we should not forget that even though COVID has given adversity to a major proportion of those organizations, there are still few organizations, a smaller proportion, such as internet service providers, companies who are in this kinds of business, in this kind of business domains. They are actually making money, right? So if we look at the other kinds of organizations, they are struggling. Okay, they have had their business plans, but somehow because of COVID, they are struggling, but still they are surviving. So if you see what are the strategies that these two kinds of the second and third kind of organizations could adopt, right? Firstly, like I said, I do not want to keep on repeating, but policy level support. Like I said, working from home requires certain institutional level policies to be enforced. And in that, it should properly articulate things concerning, provisions concerning what is working from home, what are the hours, and of course, what are the working hours, what are the break hours. If your boss or your superior is convening you to work at those declared hours, like these are break hours, is there any way that you can escalate a grievance? And also about things relating to work from home. So policies, like I said, that is also required, because that sort of eliminates the uncertainty and stress level, okay, of working from home, because it's documented, it's been disseminated, everybody is aware this is from home, these are my and also your rights, your responsibilities and rights. Okay, like I said, there are no regulations in most of the countries, so companies should set forth. So that is number one. Then number two, what are the sort of employee wellness programs that organizations can enforce during this pandemic era? Of course, to motivate and help psychologically support the employees who are working from home. For example, now I actually spoke to few of my friends and colleagues who are working in different organizations, and it is noteworthy to mention that even Sri Lankan companies have started to practice these employee wellness programs, which includes conducting weekly webinars on working from home, and on giving psychological support during work from home, like for example ergonomics, like how you can manage work while you look after kids, what are the things that you can practice to make your kids engaged while you work. These are some of the topics that are being covered in the weekly webinars that are being held in organizations, and it is mandatory that during these webinar sessions that no superior should make the employees work. So it is made compulsory for them to attend these sessions, right? And of course, you also can opt out like very cost effective methods, like sending out motivational quotes on a day-to-day basis. Of course, like reminding about how they have overcome difficulties in their past. Like for example, they had to meet a particular timeline to fulfill an order or fulfill a task, and then how you won, and how you won an award for working hard or something like that. So these gives positive energy, positive vibes, right? And also you can showcase like employee testimonials about how your performing employees who are working from home, about their strategies and all that. And then you can also conduct mindfulness programs, meditation programs online. And a big role can be played by the leadership. I know about organizations where the CEO organizes, pocket meetings with small group of employees who are working from home, who speak to them and who encourage them, so on and so forth. So if you see these wellness programs, they won't cost a lot. So even for the organizations who are not making profits, but of course, who are surviving, can opt out to conduct these kinds of wellness programs on online basis, right? So then if you look at some advanced advanced programs that you can conduct, you also can introduce things like employee assistant programs, right, where you get the support of professional counselors, and you allow your employees to go and speak to them, right, on a confidential basis, to sort out the psychological issues. But like I said, this could be a bit expensive. This could be an option for the organizations who are making profits. But then, having said that, Kavisha, there is another point that I wanted to highlight. Every company has their own, what do you call, modus operandi, way of operating, way of doing something, right? And if I highlight, I spoke to again two of my friends who are working for two different companies, and these companies are thriving these days. They are actually basically internet service providing companies. And one of my friends, that person was like very well, very happy. So that person was telling me, even I have not been commuting to work, but my transport allowance is still there. So I feel that I'm being valued, I'm being very well looked after, so I wouldn't mind going an extra mile, right? Whereas the other person, that person was telling, yes, my company is earning well. Of course, I have not experienced any pay cuts, but then our psychological problems are being doubled because our bosses, they give us this what do you call subtle coercion. They execute a subtle coercion on